So, Chapter 7 of Gibbons focuses on the listening aspect when teaching English language learners. At the beginning, here we can see that listening is not simply about comprehension. We must also view it as a route to language development, in which we can further develop our second language proficiency for our English language students. So most times, speaking and listening are grouped together in a single unit, so the specific teaching and listening may be overlooked. So it's important as teachers to recognize this importance of listening and to implement listening activities in our classrooms to ensure that our English language learners are being provided with a multitude of activities that are allowing them to practice these listening skills that will help them further their language development. Moreover, listening is an active process, and it depends not only on decoding the acoustic information, but also on the in-the-head knowledge that the listener already has about the world and the structure of language. So in the process of reading, for example, the listener is taking an active role and constructing an interpretation of what they hear, using both sounds of the language, but also their available schema and knowledge of the language system itself. So, more specifically, in-the-head knowledge allows you to map keywords onto the words you are hearing and therefore predict meaning. And here we can see that there are different types of listening, and these are, it's a very simplified like matrix view or picture of listening context. So it's important to recognize that, some of these things may not be perfectly fit into these categories, but it's still a good way to understand the different types of listening. So here we see that listening, there's 4 types of contexts of listening. There's two-way at the top, and then one-way at the bottom. And then over here we could see interpersonal topics, and over here information-based topics. And this chapter goes on to give a little information about which areas English learners will be a little more comfortable in, and others where they may struggle more. So for example, it says here the easiest listening context for EL learners involves the sorts of situations in quadrant A, also somewhat in quadrant C as well, because listening here is two-way, which means that it gives the listeners a chance to ask for clarification, or basically ask questions if they don't understand what they're hearing, which is important for English learners to do to ensure that they're gaining the full meaning of what they're listening to. However, not all situations that fall within quadrant C are easy for listeners. For example, like a phone call. It may be difficult for English learners to understand when listening over the phone. And moreover, quadrant D tasks are also likely to involve less familiar topics than those in quadrants A and B, which means that they represent the most demanding listening tasks for all English language learner students. So, implications for teaching is important to make sure that our teaching of listening is primarily focused on meaning. And the remainder of the chapter breaks down various activities, and it has them in 2 different sections, so two-way listening activities, and there's also, here we could see the two-way activities, and then there's also one-way listening activities. So the important thing to note here is that listening for a specific piece of information or listening with the aim of getting general information are different ways that one-way listening can be used. So it's very important to make sure that the tasks that we use as future teachers provide a balance between these 2 purposes. And here are some of these examples of the activities that are provided. And let me jump to chapter 8 really quick. So essentially this chapter wraps up everything, and it's about developing an integrated curriculum. So it discusses how in the classroom the integrated subject and content knowledge The three aspects of learning language, learning through language, and learning about language, or of language development, are brought together. So here, an important thing that I wanted to note, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the entire chapter, but I would like to note that we should recognize that separate provision for EAL learners impoverishes the school as a whole. It reinforces monoculturalism and monolingualism and puts the school at odds with the reality of the culturally diverse society in which it is situated. So just like going back to the importance of integration and being there for our English language learners, students, and providing them with multiple opportunities to practice language learning in the content areas, and also the importance of knowing the language demands of the curriculum and of the content that you are teaching. So as a future social science teacher, I must ensure that I am aware of these language demands and that I'm providing the proper scaffolds and supports for my English language learners to succeed in my classroom. Thank you.